Chapter 3 continued, starting at the top of page 57. "We are besieged, as you see," Merriman said, coming forward to join them. "They hope to gain a hold over you while you are not yet grown into your full power. And this is only the beginning of the peril, Will. Through all this midwinter season, their power will be waxing very strong, with the old magic able to keep it at a distance only on Christmas Eve. And even past Christmas it will grow, not losing its high force until the 12th day, the 12th night, which once was Christmas Day, and once before that, long ago, was the high winter festival of our old year." "What will happen?" Will said. "We must think only of the things that we must do," the old lady said. "And the first is to free you from the circle of dark power that is drawn now round this room." Merriman said, listening intently, "Be on your guard. Against anything. They have failed with one emotion. They will try to trap you through another next." "But it must not be fear," she said. "Remember that, Will. You will be frightened often, but never fear them. The powers of the dark can do only many things, but they cannot destroy. They cannot kill those of the light, not unless they gain a final dominion over the whole earth. And it is the task of the old ones, your task and ours, to prevent that. So do not let them put you into fear or despair." She went on, saying more, but her voice was drowned like a rock submerged in a high-tide wave, as the horrible chorus that whined and keened outside the walls rose louder, louder, faster, and angrier, into a cacophony of screeches and unearthly laughter, shrieks of terror and cackles of mirth, howlings and roars. As Will listened, his skin crept and grew damp. As if in a dream, he heard Merriman's deep voice ring out through the dreadful noise, calling him. He could not have moved if the old lady had not taken his hand, drawing him across the room, back towards the table and the hearth, the only cave of light in the dark hall. Merriman spoke close to his ear, swift and urgent. "Stand by the circle of light. Stand with your back to the table and take your hands. It is a joining they cannot break." Will stood there, his arms spread wide as out of sight beside him. Each of them took one of his hands. The light of the fire in the hearth died, and he became aware that behind him the flames of the candle circle on the table had grown tall, gigantic, so high that when he tilted back his head, he could see them rising far over him in a white pillar of light. There was no heat from this giant tree of flame, and though it glowed with great brilliance, it cast no light beyond the table. Will could not see the rest of the hall, not the walls, nor the pictures, nor any door. He could see nothing but blackness, the vast black emptiness of the awful looming night. This was the dark, rising to swallow Will Stanton before he could grow strong enough to do it harm. In the light from the strange candles, Will held fast to the old lady's frail fingers and Merriman's wood-hard fist. The shrieking of the dark grew to an intolerable peak, a high triumphant whinnying. And Will knew without sight that before him, in the darkness, the great black stallion was rearing up as it had done outside the hut in the woods, with the rider there to strike him down if the new shod hooves did not do their work. And no white mare this time could spring from the sky to his rescue. He heard Merriman shout, "The tree of flame, Will, strike out with the flame. As you spoke to the fire, speak to the flame and strike." In desperate obedience, Will filled his whole mind with the picture of the great circle of tall candle flames behind him, growing like a white tree. And as he did so, he felt the minds of his two supporters doing the same, knew that the three of them together could accomplish more than he ever imagined. He felt a quick pressure in each hand from the hand holding it, and he struck forward in his mind with the column of light, lashing it out as if it were a giant whip. Over his head there came a vast crashing flash of white light as the tall flames reared forward and down in a bolt of lightning, and a tremendous shriek from the darkness beyond as something, the rider, the black stallion, both, fell away, out, down, endlessly down. And in the gap cleft in the darkness there before them, while he still blinked dazzled eyes, stood the two great carved wooden doors through which he had first come into the hall. In the sudden silence, Will heard himself shout triumphantly, and he leaped forward, tugging free of the hands that held his own, to run to the doors. Both Merriman and the old lady cried out in a warning, but it was too late. Will had broken the circle. He was standing alone. No sooner did he realize it than he felt giddy and staggered, clutching his head, a strange ringing sound beginning to thrum in his ears. Forcing his legs to move, he lurched to the doors, leaned against them, and beat feebly on them with his fist. They did not move. The eerie ringing in his head grew. He saw Merriman moving up before him, walking with great effort, leaning far forward as though he were straining against a high wind. "Foolish!" Merriman gasped. "Foolish, Will!" He seized the doors and shook them, thrusting forward with the strength of both his arms, so that the twisted veins beside his brow stood up from the skin-like thick wire, and as he did so, he lifted his head and shouted a long, commanding phrase that Will did not understand. But the doors did not move, and Will felt weakness drawing him down as if he were a snowman melting in the sun. The thing that brought him back to the wakefulness, just as he was beginning to drift into a kind of trance, was something he was never able to describe, or even to remember very well. It was like the ending of pain, like discord changing to harmony, like the lightning in the spirits that you may feel suddenly in the middle of a gray, dull day, unaccountable until you realize that the sun has begun to shine. This silent music that entered Will's mind and took hold of his spirit came, he knew instantly, from the old lady. Without speech, she was speaking to him. She was speaking to both of them, and to the dark. He looked back, dazzled. She seemed taller, bigger, more erect than before, a figure on an altogether larger scale. And there was a golden haze about her figure, a glow that did not come from the candlelight. Will blinked, but he could not see clearly. It was as if he were separated from her by a veil. He heard Merriman's deep voice, gentler than he had yet heard it, but wrung with some strong, sudden unhappiness. "Madame," Merriman said wretchedly, take care, take care." No voice replied, but Will had a feeling of venison. Then it was gone, and the tall, glowing form that was and yet was not the old lady moved slowly forward in the darkness towards the door. And for an instant Will heard again the haunting phrase of music that he could never capture in his memory, and the doors slowly opened. Outside there was a gray light and silence, and the air was cold. Behind him, the light of the candle ring was gone, and there was only darkness. It was an uneasy, empty darkness, so that he knew the hall was no longer there. And suddenly he realized that the luminous golden figure before him was fading too, vanishing away like smoke that grows thinner, until it cannot be seen at all. For an instant there was a flash of rose-colored brilliance from the huge ring that had been on the old lady's hand, and then that too dimmed, and her bright presence faded into nothing. Will felt a desperate ache of loss, as if his whole world had been swallowed up by the dark, and he cried out. A hand touched his shoulder. Merriman was at his side. They were through the doors. Slowly the great wooded, carved portals swung back behind them, long enough for Will to see clearly that they were indeed the same strange gates that had opened for him before on the white, untrodden slope of the Chiltern Hill. And then, at that moment that they closed, the doors too were no longer there. He saw nothing, only the gray light of snow that reflects a gray sky. He was back in the snow-drowned woodland world into which he had walked early that morning. Anxiously, he swung round to Merriman. "Where is she? What happened?" It was too much for her. The strain was too great, even for her. Never before. I have never seen this before. His voice was thick and bitter, and he stared angrily at nothing. "Have they taken her?" Will did not know what words to use for the fear. "No," Merriman said. The word was so quick with scorn it might have been a laugh. "The lady is beyond their power, beyond any power. You will not ask a question like that when you have learned a little. She has gone away for a time, and that is all. It was the opening of the doors in the face of all that was willing them shut. Though the dark could not destroy her, it had drained her, left her like a shell. She must recover herself, away, alone, and that is bad for us if we should need her, as we shall, as the world always will." He glanced down at Will without warmth, and suddenly he seemed distant, almost threatening, like an enemy. He waved one hand impatiently. "Close your coat, boy, before you freeze." Will fumbled with the buttons of his heavy jacket. Merriman, he saw, was wrapped in a long, battered blue cloak, high-collared. "It was my fault, wasn't it?" he said miserably. "If I hadn't run forward when I saw the doors, if I had kept hold of your hands and not broken the circle." Merriman said curtly, "Yes." And then he relented a little. "But it was their doing, Will, not yours. They seized you. Through your impatience and your hope. They love to twist good emotion to accomplish ill." Will stood hunched with his hands in his pockets, staring at the ground. Behind his mind, a chant went sneering through his head. "You have lost the lady. You have lost the lady." Unhappiness was thick in his throat. He swallowed. He could not speak. A breeze blew through the trees and sprayed snow crystals into his face. "Will," Merriman said, "I was angry. Forgive me. Whether you had broken the three or not, things would have been the same. The doors are our great gateway into time, and you will know more about the uses of them before long. But this time, you could not have opened them, nor I, nor perhaps any of the circle. For the force that was pushing against them was the full midwinter power of the dark, which none but the lady can overcome alone, and even she only at great cost. Take heart. At the proper time she will return." He pulled at the high collar of his cloak, and it became a hood that he drew over his head. With the white hair hidden, he was a dark figure suddenly, tall and inscrutable. "Come," he said, and then led Will through the deep snow among great beeches and oaks bare of leaves. At length they paused in a clearing. "Do you know where you are?" Merriman said. Will stared round at the smooth snowbanks, the rearing trees. "Of course I don't," he said. "How could I?" "Yet, before the winter is 3/4 done," Merriman said, "you will be creeping into this dell to look at the snowdrops that grow everywhere between the trees. And then in the spring you will be back to stare at the daffodils every day for a week, to judge from last year." Will gaped at him. "You mean the manor?" he said. "The manor grounds?" In his own century, Huntercombe Manor was the great house of the village. The house itself could not be seen from the road, but its grounds lay along the side of Huntercombe Lane, opposite the Stantons' house, and stretched a long way in each direction, edged alternately by tall, wrought iron railings and ancient brick walls. A Miss Graythorne owned it, as her family had for centuries, but Will did not know her well. He seldom saw her or her manor, which he remembered vaguely as a mass of tall brick gables and Tudor chimneys. The flowers that Merriman had spoken of were private landmarks in his year. For as long as he could remember, he had slipped through the manor railings at the end of winter to stand in this one magical clearing and gaze at the gentle winter-banishing snowdrops, and later the golden daffodil glow of spring. He did not know who had planted the flowers. He had never seen anyone visiting them. He was not even sure whether anyone else knew they were there. The image of them glowed now in his mind. But rearing questions very soon chased it out. "Merriman, do you mean this clearing is here hundreds of years before I first saw it? In the great hall, is it a manor before the manor out of centuries ago? And the forest all around us that I came through when I saw the smith and the writer, it stretches everywhere. Does it all belong to—" Merriman looked down at him and laughed, a gay laugh, suddenly without the heaviness that had been over them before. "Let me show you something else," he said, and he drew Will further through the trees, away from the clearing, until there was an end to the sequence of trunks and mounds of snow, and before him Will saw, not the morning's narrow track that he had been expecting, winding its way through an endless forest of ancient crowding trees, but the familiar 20th century line of Huntercombe Lane, and beyond it, a little way up the road, a glimpse of his own house. The manor railings were before them, somewhat shortened by the deep snow. Merriman stepped stiff-legged over. Will crept through his usual gap, and they were standing on the snow-banked road. Merriman put back his hood again and lifted his white-maned head as if to sniff the air of this newer century. "You see, Will," he said, "we of the circle are planted only loosely within time. The doors are a way through it in any direction we may choose. For all times coexist, and the future can sometimes affect the past, even though the past is a road that leads to the future." But men cannot understand this, nor will you for a while yet. We can travel through the years in other ways too. One of them was used this morning to bring you back through 5 centuries or so. That is where you were, in the time of the royal forests that stretched over all the southern part of this land from Southampton Water up to the valley of the Thames here. He pointed across the road to the flat horizon, and Will remembered how he had seen the Thames twice that morning, once among its familiar fields, once buried inside among trees. He stared at the intensity of remembering on Merriman's face. 500 years ago, Merriman said, the kings of England chose deliberately to preserve those forests, swallowing up whole villages and hamlets inside them, so that the wild things, the deer and the boars and even the wolves, might breed there for the hunt. But forests are not biddable places, and the kings were, without knowing it, establishing a haven too for the powers of the dark, which might otherwise have been driven back then to the mountains and remoteness of the north. So that is where you were until now, Will, in the forest of Anderida, as they used to call it, in the long gone past. You were there in the beginning of the day, walking through the forest in the snow, there on the empty hillside of the Chilterns. Still there when you had first walked through the doors. That was a symbol, your first walking, for your birthday as one of the old ones. And there in that past is where we left the lady. I wish that I knew where and when we shall see her again, but come she will, when she can. He shrugged as if to shake away the heaviness again. And now you can go home, for you are in your own world. And you are in it too, said Will. Merriman smiled. Back again, with mixed feelings. Where will you go? About and roundabout. I have a place in this present time, just as you do. Go home now, Will. The next stage in the quest depends on the walker, and he will find you. And when his circle is on your belt beside the first, I shall come. But Will suddenly wanted to clutch at him to beg him not to go away. His home no longer seemed quite the unassailable fortress it had always been. You will be all right, Merriman said gently. Take things as they come. Remember that the power protects you. Do nothing rash to draw trouble towards you, and all will be well. And we shall meet soon, I promise you. All right, Will said uncertainly. An odd gust of wind eddied around them in the still morning, and gobbets of snow spattered down from the roadside trees. Merriman drew his cloak around him, its bottom edge swirling a pattern in the snow. He gave Will one sharp look of warning and encouragement mixed, pulled his hood forward over his face, and strode off down the road without a word. He disappeared round the bend beside Rook's Wood on the way to Dawson's farm. Will took a deep breath and ran home. The lane was silent in the deep snow in the gray morning. No birds moved or chirped. Nothing stirred anywhere. The house, too, was utterly quiet. He shed his outdoor clothes, went up the silent stairs on the landing. He stood looking out the white roofs and fields. No great forest mantled the earth now. The snow was as deep, but it was smooth over the flat fields of the valley, all the way to the curving Thames. All right, said James sleepily from inside the room. From behind the next door, Robin gave a kind of formless growl and mumbled, In a minute, coming. Gwen and Barbara came stumbling together out of the bedroom they shared, wearing nightdresses, rubbing their eyes. There's no need to bellow, Barbara said reproachfully to Will. Bellow? He stared at her. Wake up, everyone, she said in a mock shout. I mean, it's a holiday, for goodness sake. Will said, But I... Never mind, Gwen said. You can forgive him for wanting to wake us up today. After all, he has a good reason. And she came forward and dropped a quick kiss on the top of his head. Happy birthday, Will, she said.